Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Tony Robbins once said, "The quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of the questions you are asking yourself." Our guest today is Marc Champagne, author of Personal Socrates, a book with 38 questions to help you to elevate the quality of your life. Now, each of these 38 questions were sourced by one of the inspirational people that Marc profiled in the book. For example, who am I optimizing to become? That's James Clear. What world do I want to create? That's J.R.R. Tolkien. What expectations am I holding in my relationships? Melissa Ambrosini. How do I become irreplaceable? Coco Chanel. And what is within my control? And that's from Ryan Holiday, who is a big influence on Marc Champagne and a big influence on how he wrote this book. Now, Marc became a true believer in the life-changing magic of asking empowering questions when he found himself stuck in a depression after deleting an app and his entire business from the Apple App Store, which had touched the lives of over 86 million people, but it couldn't find a sustainable business model, leaving him without a business, a loss of identity, and a lot of financial liabilities with a young family. And it was one question that took him from hopelessness and despair to hope. And that question is where we begin this podcast. So Marc, on your beautifully designed book, Personal Socrates, when I received it, I flipped it over to the back cover and I noticed that there is nothing on the back other than a single quote standing alone, no other testimonials, no book description. And when I read the quote, I was like, damn, that shit's deep. So what is the quote and why did you choose to give it its own special real estate on the back of the book?
Thank you for saying that. I mean, the quote is simply this: at any point, we are all one question away from a completely different life. And the reason why it's on the back of the book and it's standing on its own is that line is essentially how I live my life. And it's the purpose behind the work for me when it comes to mental fitness and helping people surface that question for themselves.
Beautiful. Marc, I got to ask the question. What was your question that moved you into doing this mental fitness stuff full time?
There were many questions. And the thing with a good quality question is it's not necessarily the actual question. It's more so the timing and the relevance of the question that makes it a quality question. So for me, the realization that led to that one line and really going all in on this work was the moment I had to delete one of the first guided journaling apps that was out there, and it was called Keo. We had just created it. We were 2 years into it, and we had reached 86.9 million people with this app. I mean, we weren't app developers. This was our first rodeo in this space. But in the same year, I'm looking at those Apple dashboard metrics, and my next step is to hit delete from App Store. Because the business and the app financially wasn't succeeding. It was succeeding in many other ways. It's the only reason, we're speaking essentially. So I'm grateful for the journey. But when I was doing that, it was like deleting my identity for the last 3 years of working on it. And it was dark. Those were the questions like, how could I fail at such a colossal level? What would my family think? What would my ex-colleagues think? And it wasn't until after some self-reflection torture on myself and really going deep on, a lot of the past interviews I had conducted that it came to this realization that, well, wait a second, all these people that I'm studying and interviewing, they're asking a very different set of questions and they're asking very progressive questions to pull you out of situations like this. And I landed on the question that saved me from a deep depression, and that's just, what do I want for my life? And it was that realization that, wow, like if that could save me from going down a pretty deep and dark hole, how else can we leverage questions in a day-to-day basis, right? Like a gratitude question in a moment when your mind is looping in all these negative narratives instantly can stop that right away. So there's a lot of questions. And the thing too, like I can ask that same question today, you know, what do I want for my life? It doesn't serve the same value, I guess, that it did, 3 years ago when I was, in a dark place. It serves more as a check-in at this point. So that's the key, is just really, leveraging mental fitness in these prompts to meet us where we're at, in our life. And then the prompts and the practices evolve with us.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that moment of despair. You said 86.9 million people had been touched by this journaling app. 2 years, your identity, built this thing, gotten investors, and then that moment that you detail in the book of like having to click delete, right? I mean, and most of us don't have that moment where it's like so definitive where you push a button and it's gone. You profile Kobe Bryant in the book, where Kobe, I think, just lost the NBA finals, and he was in the hotel room asking himself those same questions around, what if I never win another title again?
Yeah.
What if this was it? And I think we can all relate to that mind spiral of, it's asking questions, but it's asking questions that push us deeper into despair. What is it, that was in you that was able to find that question, what do I want for my life, that actually allowed you to say, I'm going to stick with that one? And why was that the one that pulled you out of that despair?
Well, it's interesting because, so I'm glad you brought up the Kobe example, because it also shows that we're all human. In Kobe's example, he had all these questions of why they didn't win. Are we going to win another championship and so forth? And like he sat in that for that night, but then the next morning made a decision, all right, I'm going to ask a different set of questions to move forward. And it was similar with me, not overnight. That's definitely not the case. It was kind of weeks of going back and forth until someone else that's in the book, Chip Conley, I sent him an email and just said, Chip, here's kind of what's going on. I would love any advice on the path forward or what I should be thinking about. And all he sent back was that one question. And, I respect someone like Chip Conley, who's doing incredible work in this world. And it was enough to, again, just pause my narrative, because that one question then led to others, right? So what do I want for my life? Who needs to be in my life to support, what I want? How do I want my days to look and feel like? It just leads, which is essentially, the Socratic method, just question after question, until you get to this point. For me, I got back to a point of being hopeful, because before that was the first time in my life that I had lost all hope. I didn't have a plan forward. My backup plan didn't feel right anymore. Then you're just left in this state of feeling hopeless and feeling like a failure and that there's no way out. So yeah, I mean, I'll never forget that moment. It's funny you mentioned just like the physical like tap of the mouse pad, because I was in a co-working space in Toronto, Canada. This beautiful space. Our team was scattered around the world. So essentially I was, by myself other than the people in the co-working space. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, like one tap and I'm just erasing years worth of work, not just my work, but, the team's work, and hundreds of thousands of journal entries from other people that, we did as much as possible to allow for exports and things like that. But obviously, you don't nail all of that. So it was heavy. It was really heavy to go through that process. But between the reflection, the prompts, and something we talked about before hitting record, my men's group, I mean, that's how I got through those moments.
I love how you brought hope into the equation here, because we often hear curiosity can be the panacea to desperate times. Like, get curious around it. But what I hear you saying is like, yes, get curious, but you got to ask the right sort of questions and why to get to hope. So I love that. Also, like when you mentioned, because you're mentioning your men's group now, and this is something Dominic and I talk a lot about being in community while you're doing this work. I'm curious, like when you started to ask yourselves those questions, who else was involved? Did you have others that you were bouncing these questions off, or did you get answers from community? What did community look like for you when you're in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think like on our most critical points or situations in life, like we default, or at least I do, default to the people that are just closest, to me. And for me, that definitely was my wife. I mean, we had a lot of conversations during that time, and she was fully supportive of the path, which, had she not been, it probably would be a different situation. Like I really banked on her emotional support going through this. And then, like I said, the 5 guys in my group, I wasn't looking to them for answers. I was looking for them to just hold space and really connect with how I was feeling. Because even though my relationship with my wife is fantastic, there's still stuff I'm holding back, from an emotion standpoint, because I'll never forget this. And it's still like this to this day. I don't want to put additional stress on her, who's at that time we had a 2-year-old as well. And now we have 2 kids. She's doing everything possible to, keep things in check at home. The last thing I want to do is add additional stress there, which then just puts on more stress on my side. So I only share that because I felt like I couldn't be 100% transparent with how I was feeling. And that men's group was critical there. They have been the people that I've been probably the most honest with out of even my closest friends.
We talk about this. I write about this on my social accounts. Hey, it's great that you have an open emotional relationship with your wife. Just don't make her your therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's certain things that you need to bring to your group of guys. And it sounds like you did that. Mark, one of the things I would love to do is to get into your book and, the power of asking better questions. I think Tim Ferriss might have been the one that I heard say this. I don't know if he's like the originator of it, but the quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions that you ask.
Absolutely.
Tim Ferriss is one of the best at asking questions to deconstruct the essence of things. And if I counted correctly, there are 38 questions in your book that you asked, and you profile different people who you've either interviewed directly or done research on. People like, James Clear, Dan Doty, one of the co-founders of Everyman, Maya Angelou, Robin Williams. We just mentioned Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
So what I'd love to know, maybe I'll throw 2 things out here for you and you can jump on whichever one feels better. How should someone, be using this book, right? How would you advise them to go through this book? And then what's a question that, out of those 38 that you're like, this was one that made my balls tingle?
Yeah, I love that. So there are 38 opening questions in the chapters. There's actually over 100 questions in the book scattered throughout the profiles because the way they're set up, like for Dan Doty's profile, for example, his opening prompt is, how do I feel? And then there's sub-questions to get a little bit deeper and connect there's practices that are also included in those 3 to 4 pages, which links to how I suggest people consume the book. But again, the biggest thing is, go at it in terms of in a way that works for you. I suggest that you read the intro from start to finish just to get the lay of the land, the context. And then from there, take it slow. There's a reason why these chapters are only 3 to 4 pages. I recorded the audiobooks. I know they're 10 to 12 minutes long. They're not long. And they're designed to be consumed as your mental fitness in the morning if you don't have any practice, or if you do, to just shift your perspective.
And by the way, since you've mentioned mental fitness a couple of times already, why don't you go ahead and define what that means to you?
For me, mental fitness is just anything that you're doing to train your mind to work for you instead of against you. And it's like the umbrella term. Under mental fitness, you have mental health, mental performance, mental resiliency, optimization, and all of that. The reason I talk about this from that lens is that a lot of us can resonate with physical fitness. And, what I think what stands out is that, like, if you don't like to run, that doesn't rule out exercise, right? So same thing with mental fitness. And the why I talk about that, there's so many different things we can do. We did an awesome round of breath work to kick off this podcast. But if you don't like breath work, there's journaling, there's meditation, there's so many other things. It's just the idea of just let's be open and take accountability and take ownership of being mentally fit. Like, we can all do that. The book is designed to help people, find a personalized mental fitness ritual or set of practices that will work for you based on where you're at in your current journey. And the way I suggest people to jump in is to really just look at the table of contents, see if there is an opening prompt or a person that resonates with you.
Yeah, can I read a few of those? I want to read a few of them to give the audience a flavor for what's here, because I found it to be almost like Tribe of Mentors, Tim Ferriss's Tribe of Mentors, where you could kind of jump to any part of the book that really resonated with you, because it's not necessarily a sequential book, or did I have that wrong?
No, there's a sequence in the sense of, really focusing on prompts that help boost your clarity. So you understand, like, who am I now? Where did I come from? Where am I heading? And then prompts to help with being intentional. Like, so James Clear, right? Like, do my habits and systems support the person I'm striving to become, for example? But with that being said, I think if you scan the people and the prompts and you land somewhere, that's probably where you'll get the most value because you landed there for a reason, right?
Right, exactly. And some of the things that jump off the page to me may jump off the page differently to someone else. And this one, Chip Conley, how can I be the most curious person in the room? That's a question. How do I protect my soul by Marcus Aurelius? Who am I optimizing to become? James Clear. How do I accept the world as it is? By Jerry Colonna. I believe he was on Tim Ferriss' podcast.
Yeah, I just interviewed him literally an hour ago for the second time, and I almost want to write a second profile. He is a magician when it comes to this stuff.
We all, as a men's group, listened to this one. He gave Tim Ferriss a question that has stuck with me. How am I complicit in creating the conditions of my life that I say I don't want?
Yeah.
How am I complicit in creating the conditions of my life in a way that I said that I don't want? And so that means, like, if I'm in a relationship that's unsatisfying, how am I complicit in being in that relationship?
Yeah.
If I'm overwhelmed in my life, how am I complicit? And that one question has constantly, when I get myself into a state of overwhelm or unsatisfaction or feeling directionless, how do I help create this? It's a beautiful, powerful question.
Well, it's interesting because, I definitely practice what I preach. I actually, if I look at all these profiles, Jerry's is the one that I actually go back and reread when my mind feels heavy and full and not clear. And it's just, again, a good reminder of how can I meet life as it is, or, accept life as it is and just, be present, be in the moment and realize the whole through line to his profile is realize that everything is impermanent, right? The good and the bad. So it's so funny because I interviewed him specifically for a docuseries I'm recording for Mental Fitness for Founders. And true to Jerry's style, he starts flipping the mic essentially and asking me questions. Next thing you know, we're going down the whole route of when I did hit delete from the App Store. And there's a reason he's known as the CEO Whisperer.
Yeah, I can see that. He did the same thing with Tim Ferriss, and it was one of the more captivating episodes that I'd listened to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mark, what I would love to know again is, was there a particular question in the book that really stood out to you, a profile that you did that was just like, yeah, this is a can't miss. You have to dive in on this one.
Yeah, the one that I remember doing the research for that was just blowing my mind was Stephen Hawking. Most of us know Stephen as, obviously someone that had ALS and has contributed in spades to just science and physics and astrology and whatnot. And the other thing, I knew is that he was kind of a funny guy type thing when you'd see some of his videos and so forth. But I didn't realize how dialed in his mind was. And there's a quote here I'd love to read if you're okay with that, because it really sets the tone. He said, "I have been very lucky. My disability has not been a serious handicap. Indeed, it has probably given me more time than most people to pursue the quest for knowledge." And I remember thinking, fuck, that's
perspective. That's perspective right there, man.
You just nailed it. It's perspective, right? Yeah. And I think if I had a goal for any of these profiles, it's that when people are reading them, that it invites a pause, right? Because questions invite the luxury of a pause. And if we can invite the pause and read something like that, then all of a sudden, what's looping in our minds can be shifted or released, or to your point, you have that perspective shift. And often all it takes is a question or a line like this, right? And I personally use, and Ryan Holiday's, he's in the book, but I've used his book, The Daily Stoic, for years to do that, to just as my coffee's brewing, read one page, and next thing you know, it's like, wow, you have all this Stoic philosophy that, it just shifts your mind just in a micro way, but enough to not start the day with looping narratives and so forth, right? Yep. So Stephen Hawking was just a great reminder of, we're just a small drop for one thing in this universe, and that, we should always ask questions and challenge, even the things that are out there that seem to be 100% proven. That's how his work expanded, right? He challenged those perspectives. The other thing is just, there's another line in there. I don't know if he said this or it kind of came out as inspiration to doing the research, but when we catch ourselves looking down, which we often are, with our phones and so forth. Or if you think about when you're not feeling the greatest, usually you're looking down, you're hunched down. So when you catch yourself looking down, look up at the stars instead, and just shifting your posture, can change your mental state. So things like that, small things, but you do that day in and day out, they have tremendous, tremendous benefits.
Yeah. I'm finding that I'm starting to ask different questions of my life right now. I've shared with the listeners of the show that I've been going through this extended period of kind of like undetermined, undiagnosed physical illness, and maybe something like long COVID. The best way to describe it is like, what it feels like 3 days before you're in the like full-fledged flu.
Yeah.
Or maybe like the last couple of days of a flu where you're coming out of, like, you're not bedridden, but you're always tired and your body's aching and you're not motivated to do anything. And you're like, you have brain fog
and questioning, like, what's going on?
Yeah. What's going on? Like, and you have, like, this is how my last 2 months have been every day. Right. And some days it's that plus anxiety. Yeah. And the good days are when it's without the anxiety. So what's interesting about that is I'm used to being someone who's like in turbo mode all the time, energy wise. And now when I have like 40% of the energy I'm used to, it's causing me to ask very different questions around what's the most important things to say yes to.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm starting to ask questions. How can I get just as much done with 40% of my energy? Mm-hmm. Right. Or like the more important things that, like, who do I want to really spend my time with? All of these questions are really starting to bring, you say the first third of your book is really about clarity. Right? Mm-hmm. The second third of your book is about intentionality. And then the third part is about expansion. But the first two are about like narrowing down before you expand. My life in many capacities when I'm really energized is way too big and chaotic. And now it's actually really simplifying and it's causing me to ask questions for clarity. And I can, just like Stephen Hawking said, like, oh yeah, good thing that I wasn't really like severely disabled when the rest of the world would be like, that's my worst nightmare. Yeah. And he's like, it's just a minor inconvenience. It's causing me to ask questions that actually put me back in power. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, man, but when you were in that place of despair after hitting delete, the first experience is all loss of control, complete disempowerment. Mm-hmm. But having a good question to ask puts you right back in the fucking driver's seat.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry you're going through that. I'm happy though that, you're getting something out of what you're experiencing. But what I'm trying to do to help people is, because usually there's this massive wall that people hit, right? They like burn out or something like that. And then that's when the bigger questions are being asked, when we don't have to wait for that, right? Like if you think about it, right? Like let's ask those questions now and really prioritize and be intentional with our life. Just to answer your question though, for me, like bringing back that sense of empowerment and the motivation of a plan and so forth, like the questions that really helped or the practices that help were just being present and gratitude. I remember like even when I hit delete, I remember thinking, this sucks. Like the feelings definitely suck and I'd rather not be going through this experience. But at the same time, I'm in this co-working space that's pretty beautiful. There's a lot of intelligent people. It's safe here. Coffee's good. I'll meet great people. And I'm also deleting this app on a laptop that the majority of the world doesn't have access to. So again, like just like Stephen Hawking, like perspective shift, even though it felt like everything was exploding outside of that environment, when you can tap into that mindset, it just gives you enough time and enough mental space or capacity to inch forward or take one step. And I think that's key because when we don't do that, things start to spiral. And then that's when it gets really challenging, right? Because all of a sudden, an hour it turns into hours or days and weeks. And next thing you know, on a light scale, it's like your shoulders start to get sore, your neck is sore, you're like, oh, I need a massage. You have all this mental tension, or as Chip Conley calls it, psychic toll, right? That stuff adds up. I mean, that's the less severe side of it. Obviously, it can go quite a bit further. But if we can check in with ourselves and just slow it down, get present, tap into gratitude, we have the opportunity to really like rewire our mind one question at a time.
Mark, where do you see guys go after they read the book? So we've got all these prompts. We've started to go down the path of mental fitness. And then what? Like, what are they gravitating towards? What are they doing?
Well, I mean, it's obviously different for everyone, but I think anyone that prioritizes time in reflection like this just boosts their self-awareness. So all of a sudden, now you start seeing the signs more clearly. And now you start seeing like, oh, that's the path I need to go. Because you're essentially organizing your mind, right? Like before, it's like a physical room where you just jammed everything in there and you know there's something in the back corner that you need to retrieve, but you've got to empty out the whole damn room to get there, which takes so much energy and so much, time and resources. Day by day, as you're going through these type of questions or a journaling practice or any of these mental fitness practices, they really just help organize the mind. So in terms of what's next is usually the path starts to become more clear, right? And then all of a sudden you're introduced to breath work, or you're introduced to all these other modalities that can help your mind thrive and your body thrive and everything in between, essentially. That's what happened to me. I didn't know about breath work or even, I knew of meditation, but I wasn't really practicing much. My big thing was journaling. Like that was the thing that I picked up. So it's fun because the what's next is, I don't know, it's endless. That's what's so exciting about mental fitness, right? You get started and there's just so many different paths you can go. And there's usually not really a drawback to going down those paths, right?
All right, guys. So I just came up with something. I don't know if it's a good idea, but how about we play a game? Why don't we take scenarios that are pretty common inside of our, men's communities around challenges that these guys are dealing with, and I'll present them, and then you guys can come up with the empowering questions they can ask to help them navigate through those situations. Is that a terrible idea, or are you guys down for that game?
Let's do it.
Well, it's to be determined if it was a terrible idea or not, but let's do it. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Good point.
Okay. Fair enough. So I'm thinking of one particular scenario where man's been working for 15 years in one particular field, decided I'm done with that. I don't know what's next. I have a wife, I have kids. I'm trying to figure out what my transition is, and I don't even know the next step to take. So what are the questions to be asking in that scenario?
Well, I'll default to the question I ask myself, right? Like, what do I want for my life? And, the question after that you can leverage, like, what would the ideal day look and feel like? Just map that out. Like, just don't go into a prompt like that, with rules and limitations and so forth. Just like let your mind run wild and map out the perfect day. And then you start to realize, okay, well, there are these elements, for example, that really light me up. And then if the clarity is then, surfaced from some prompts like that, usually the next step is having the courage to take a leap, right? Which is challenging. And the question that helps with that is like, what's the worst that can happen, right? And map that out. In my case, I did ask that question, and the worst that could happen actually did happen. But I was naive enough to not go down that path, and I felt like I had a strong enough plan if things didn't work out. That's the key up front, is that you feel like, okay, I've mitigated as much risk as possible by leaving the secure situation. I know it's not right for me. I know this path over here is right. I've gone through the exercise. I went through the reflection. Here are some steps towards that path. And I think that's the other big one. If I learned anything from like Jane Austen or Picasso, it's like our life, they're just chapters. Or, Picasso's work isn't just the one phase of his work when he painted everything in blue tones. It's the whole body of work, right? So just know that we might mess up that next chapter, or it might not be the exact situation that we wanted to play out, but it's going to lead into the path, right? So it just lightens the situation a bit, or takes some pressure off.
Yeah.
That's the first time that Jane Austen and Picasso have been merged so seamlessly together in the same sentence. I would love to see those two dance together.
Yeah, that would be something.
Dance together. The question, Dom, that comes up for me here is, what gives me my greatest energy? And if that's hard, if that's like, I don't know what gives me my greatest energy, I would go like, what am I inspired by? What do I follow on Instagram? What do I see in the news that I gravitate towards? Where do I like to go on vacation? That kind of like really easy, graspy sort of stuff can at least provide a spark for a path.
Yeah.
Good questions. I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll bring this plane in for a landing. How about the guy? He's fueled most of his life off of anxiety and fear, runs around and does a million things and says, I want to break that habit, but man, I don't know how to. What are the questions you would encourage him to ask, especially if he's afraid of, I'm going to lose my edge? Because fear is the thing that keeps me motivated, right? Or that's his belief. Mm-hmm. So what are the questions you would encourage that guy to ask?
That's a great example that I feel like many could resonate with. Here's a big one. And this takes some courage to sit down and answer. But if everyone on the other line or other side of the mic's listening, it's willing to take the challenge and just be honest with themselves and answer the question, what am I pretending not to know? Because that guy knows exactly the step that needs to be taken. It's in the back corner of the mind. It's there. It's always been there. It's just, he's probably distracting, right? With all of these other things to mask the fact that, hey, I need to do this to let go of this fear and this anxiety and so forth. But a question like, what am I pretending not to know, usually will help surface, a bit of a plan forward.
Mark, I feel like a question like that needs some space. And so if a guy were to ask himself that question, what would he do next? Would he journal with that? Would he meditate with that? How do you start to access the intelligence to that question?
Yeah, the thing is, to answer any of these type of questions, we've got to prime the mind to be in a good state to do so, right? I wouldn't ask that question if you're in the peak of an anxiety attack or anything like that, right? That's when you can leverage some check-in questions of hey, how am I feeling? One word. Where do I feel that in my body? Because often, as you guys know, when we identify where we feel it, releases it, right? So just set yourself up or do something. Answer this question, what are 5 things that I know will put a smile on my face if I perform these activities or fire up these practices? Do one of those things, then journal on that question. And when I say journal, because journaling has this funny perception on what it is. Usually it's pen to paper, and sometimes I get this oh, you're talking about the 12-year-old girl journaling in her diary about the boy at school type thing, which there's nothing wrong with that. But journaling, the practice is reflection. And reflection can be done pen to paper, in an app, an audio note. You can take a walk, right? So take a walk and reflect on that question. But give yourself some space. I think that's the key, is the mental space. Ryan Holiday talks about this all the time. I don't have his profile up, but basically the idea, or to paraphrase his work, it's just you've got to give some space. You've got to quiet down. Tell the kids in the library to shh. I need that time to think and reflect. So set yourself up to do that. Answer that question, and then at least when you have the answer, it's data. What you decide to do with that is totally up to you, but you have some data, and maybe you're not going to take the step right tomorrow, but at least you have some information that, hey, this is where I can start, because I know this is the trigger point.
So Mark, thank you so much for being on the show, man. I know the book came out just a few months ago, and what I feel about it, when I received it in the mail yesterday, I thought this would be a great gift book. And one of the books that's actually gifted most, I've gotten this, I think 2 or 3 times, people have given me as a gift, is The Daily Stoic, right, by Ryan Holiday, which you referenced. And I think one of the reasons why it's a great gift is because you can just pull it open to a page, nibble on it a day at a time. And I feel like your book also does that with just those short chapters of wisdom. You pick on it each day, but it's also beautifully designed. So is there anything else that you would want to say, leave our listeners with, either with respect to getting your book, how to follow you, or any pearls of wisdom?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much. That just fills my heart. Because like I said, the Daily Stoic has been leaning against my coffee machine for years. And Ryan Holiday actually had a lot to do with the structure of this book. I wrote about 25,000 words, and that he just then said, hey, you need to redo that in a different way, which is what you see in front of you now. So I'm grateful for that conversation. But the point I would love to leave with people is just exactly how we started. Life can get stressful. Let's just be real with what's going on right now. There's a lot going on in the world, but just remember everything is impermanent, and really come back to that question, right? That really we are one question away, right, from a different life or a different mood or mental state. So have your list of questions in the back pocket that will flip your mind at a moment's notice. Right? A gratitude question. Just, and anyone listening right now, you can try this. Just think of someone right now that means a lot to you in your life that you haven't thanked or said hello to in a long time. Send them a text. Hey, just thinking about you. Hope you have a great day. They write back. You made their day. They write back. They've made your day. And most importantly, you're not looping on whatever was firing up in terms of narratives in your mind. Like, that's just how fast it can happen, right? So I'll leave people with that. And I'd love to hear your questions. So please drop any reflective prompts that are helpful for you. I'm over at behindthehuman.com. All my work, everything, socials, book, podcasts, all over there. Behindthehuman.com. Thanks, guys.
Hey fellas, if you are not following me on Instagram yet, I invite you to come check out what's going on over there. Every single day, I post my best thinking around better habits, personal leadership, masculinity, and what women want. Now, my profile is designed to speak to men, but 60% of my followers are women because everything I'm posting, they're like, yes, we want men like that. And if you come and just read the comments, I swear to you, it's better than any personal development workshop you can go to, any book you can read on the subject, because real life women are giving real-time feedback on the things that they want to see and feel and experience from men. So at the top of the show notes, I have my Instagram handle. Highly encourage you to follow, start commenting, because one of the things I get all the time from women on my Instagram posts are, where are all the guys doing the inner work? And I tell them, they're right here in my community, but you guys got to make yourself visible. So the top of the show notes is my Instagram handle. Come follow, participate in the conversation.